They didn't expect anything from the humans standing against the wall. No rank insignia, no entourage, no weapon, just another quiet Terran, assigned to watch and not be seen. That mistake would echo across the galaxy. I was never meant to take a seat inside the Galactic Convergence Hall. The Terran Union made that very clear. Observe. Verify translation systems. Do not interfere. Humanity was still considered an emerging species. Useful, adaptable, but politically insignificant. We were invited out of curiosity, not respect. So I stood near the outer ring of the chamber, surrounded by beings who could shatter cities with a word or a gesture. The hall itself felt unreal, a vast amphitheater of floating platforms suspended in a transparent void, stars drifting slowly beneath our feet. Over 100 species filled the tiers, arranged by influence, threat classification, and historical aggression indexes. Observers like me didn't get chairs. I scanned the rows anyway, hoping someone might be absent. No luck. Every seat was occupied by claws, armored limbs, glowing tendrils, or bodies that defied anatomy entirely. I was about to step back when something fast and shimmering moved in my peripheral vision. A hand, slender, radiant, and warm, closed firmly around my wrist. "Sit here," a calm voice said. The chamber fell silent. Every conversation died at once. The presiding AI paused mid-sentence. I felt 100 species focus on me simultaneously, their attention sharp and heavy. Slowly, carefully, I turned my head to see who had touched me. Princess Vale of the Aurelian Star Dominion. Even among legends, she was unmistakable. The Aurelians were luminous beings, their skin reflecting light like polished gold and pearl. Vale wore living crystal armor that shifted subtly with her breathing, and a crown of hovering light denoted her royal authority. She wasn't just royalty, she was a fleet commander, a political enforcer, and a figure most species preferred not to provoke. And she was holding my wrist. "Your Highness," I started, my throat suddenly dry. "I don't believe I'm authorized." Her grip tightened slightly. "Not painful. Just final." "Sit," she repeated. So I did. The moment I took the seat beside her, the hall erupted in controlled chaos. Delegates recoiled. A scaled warlord hissed openly. A silicon-based envoy dimmed its glow in what I later learned was fear. Several species began rapid internal communications, no doubt rewriting threat assessments involving humans. Princess Vale, meanwhile, released my wrist and leaned back as if nothing unusual had occurred. "Forgive the breach of protocol," she said quietly, eyes forward. "But humans have a tendency to remain standing when decisions are being made." I swallowed. "Most beings don't solve that by abducting us into royal seating." A faint curve touched her lips. "Most beings refuse to touch me at all." As the summit began, I expected hostility, posturing, maybe even violence. That was the Aurelian reputation. Instead, something unexpected happened. She whispered questions to me. Not about politics or power, but about people. Why humans maintained eye contact with superiors. Why we used our hands so much when we spoke. Why fear didn't always stop us from speaking honestly. When a rival delegate challenged her proposal aggressively, she didn't respond with fury. She leaned toward me and murmured, "Is that display sincere aggression or insecurity?" "Insecurity," I whispered back. "He wants to look dangerous." She nodded, and dismantled him publicly with calm logic so precise the chamber fell silent again. That was when I realized something important. The galaxy feared Princess Vale. But she was listening to me. By the second hour of the summit, I stopped pretending this was a coincidence. Princess Vale hadn't pulled me into that seat on impulse. Every question she asked, every pause before she spoke, carried intent. While the rest of the chamber argued through rehearsed aggression and ceremonial dominance, she used me as something entirely different, a reference point. Perspective. The Aurelians were known for conquest through inevitability. They didn't rush. They didn't bluff. They applied pressure until resistance collapsed. Most species mistook that patience for cruelty. Watching Vale up close, I began to understand it was something else entirely. Control. When the Korth Syndicate accused the Aurelian Dominion of monopolizing hyperspace corridors, the room tensed. Several delegates leaned back, preparing for the verbal equivalent of orbital bombardment. That accusation had sparked wars before. Vale didn't even look at the Korth representative. Instead, she glanced sideways at me. "Humans," she said softly, "when accused publicly, do you strike back immediately?" I hesitated. "Depends. If the accusation is meant to provoke, sometimes we let it hang. Makes the accuser uncomfortable." Her eyes brightened, subtle, but unmistakable. She let 3 full seconds pass in silence. The Korth envoy shifted. Murmurs spread. The silence stretched just long enough to become oppressive. Then Vale spoke. She acknowledged the accusation calmly, reframed the data, and exposed the Korth's own expansion violations without raising her voice once. The response was devastating, not because it was loud, but because it was undeniable. By the time she finished, the Korth delegate was forced to formally retract the accusation. I felt the weight of the room change. Not toward fear. Toward recalibration. During the first recess, several delegates glanced at me openly now. A few whispered. One avian species tilted its head repeatedly in what my implant flagged as strategic curiosity. Humans weren't just present anymore. We were adjacent to power. "You are unusually composed," Vale said as the chamber lights dimmed for recess. "Most beings tremble when seated beside me." "I am trembling," I admitted. "I just learned a long time ago not to let it steer the conversation." That earned a quiet sound from her, almost a laugh. "Your kind disguises fear as restraint," she said. "Interesting." The second session grew sharper. Old grudges resurfaced. Border disputes. Military posturing. At one point, a coalition proposed restricting Aurelian fleet movement entirely. The suggestion was political suicide. Vale didn't erupt. She leaned toward me again. "If your species were cornered publicly, what would you do?" I thought of Earth's history. Of cold wars and quieter victories. "We'd look for an exit that lets everyone save face. Even if we don't need one." She considered that. Then she did something no one expected. She accepted partial restrictions. Temporary, conditional, and reciprocal. Framed as cooperation instead of concession. The chamber froze. Then, slowly, votes shifted. I realized then that she wasn't using me to soften the Aurelians. She was using humanity's instincts, our diplomacy shaped by survival, to outmaneuver an entire galaxy without firing a shot. By the time the final session began, the narrative had flipped. The Aurelians were no longer viewed as a looming threat, but as calculated partners. And humans? Humans were no longer invisible. As the presiding AI announced preliminary consensus, Vale finally turned fully toward me. "You have altered probabilities today," she said. "Not through force. Through presence." "I just translated tone," I replied. "You did the rest." Her expression shifted, something unguarded flickering beneath centuries of discipline. "Most species see me as a conclusion," she said quietly. "You treated me as a conversation." For the first time since entering the hall, I felt something other than fear. I felt history tightening around a single point. And it wasn't finished yet. By the final hours of the convergence, tension no longer crackled through the chamber. It waited. Every delegate could feel that something fundamental had shifted, even if they didn't yet understand what it was. Agreements that had stalled for decades were suddenly being reconsidered. Objections were softer now, phrased carefully. No one wanted to be the next example Princess Vale dismantled with quiet precision. And no one stopped watching the human beside her. I became acutely aware of it. The glances, the recalculated body language, the subtle adjustments in posture when species addressed the Aurelian throne. They weren't just measuring Vale anymore. They were measuring us. During a brief pause in proceedings, An insectoid ambassador approached the boundary of our platform, its multifaceted eyes reflecting the hall's light. "You are Terran," it clicked, translator smoothing the sound. "Your species has not previously influenced high-tier negotiations." "That's correct," I said carefully. "Is this influence intentional?" Before I could answer, Vale spoke without looking at the ambassador. "Yes." The insectoid recoiled slightly and retreated without another word. I exhaled slowly. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," Vale replied. "Perception stabilizes when clarity replaces speculation." The final debate centered on governance, shared authority over contested regions. Historically, the Aurelians vetoed such measures outright. Their dominance gave them no incentive to compromise. The galaxy expected refusal. Vale leaned back, hands resting calmly against her armor. "Human," she said quietly, "when your kind gained strength, what prevented you from ruling everything you could reach?" I thought of Earth again, of mistakes, of restraint learned the hard way. "We tried," I admitted. "It didn't end well. Eventually we learned that control without consent costs more than it gives." She absorbed that in silence. When the vote was called, the Aurelian Dominion did not veto. They voted in favor. The chamber erupted, not in noise but in shock. Bioluminescent patterns flashed. Neural species spiked internal signals. The presiding AI paused to revalidate the count twice before announcing confirmation. Shared governance had passed. History had just been rewritten. As delegates began departing, Vale remained seated beside me, unmoving. The weight of what had happened pressed in from all sides. "You have done more than advise," she said at last. "You have altered how my people will be approached for generations." "I didn't plan that," I said. "I just answered honestly." "Honesty," she replied, "is rare at this level." She stood, towering as ever, and extended her hand again, this time not as command, but invitation. "Human," she said formally, her voice carrying just far enough to be heard by nearby delegates. "I require a liaison to the Terran Union. One who understands both restraint and resolve." My heart hammered. This wasn't just a role. It was trust, access, a bridge between humanity and one of the most powerful empires in known space. "Why me?" I asked quietly. She met my eyes. "Because when offered safety, you chose proximity. When faced with power, you chose dialogue." I took her hand. Around us, several delegates froze mid-step. News would spread fast. In that single gesture, humanity's standing shifted again, not through fleets or weapons, but through presence beside authority. As we walked from the platform together, I realized something profound. Humanity hadn't entered the galactic stage by demanding attention. We had simply taken a seat, and refused to be insignificant. The historians would argue about the moment for centuries. Some would claim humanity truly arrived when our ships first crossed interstellar space. Others would point to treaties, trade networks, or the slow expansion of Terran influence across neutral systems. A few would argue it happened during a later conflict, when human strategy reshaped galactic warfare. They would all be wrong. It began with a seat. My appointment as Aurelian Terran liaison was announced 3 cycles later, after the Convergence's decisions had settled into policy. The galaxy reacted predictably: concern, curiosity, and more than a little fear. A human standing beside an Aurelian princess wasn't just symbolic. It implied shared intent. The Terran Union nearly refused. Not because they doubted me, but because they understood the weight of what was being offered. The Aurelians didn't invite outsiders into their inner circles, ever. To do so meant trust measured in consequences, not words. In the end, Earth accepted. My first months were a lesson in contrast. The Aurelian court was silent, precise, and brutally efficient. Every movement carried meaning. Every pause was deliberate. Yet beneath that control, I saw what others missed. Uncertainty. The galaxy feared the Aurelians because no one believed they could be reasoned with. But reason, I learned, had always been there, waiting for someone patient enough to speak without flinching. Princess Vale used me less as an advisor now, and more as a stabilizer. When negotiations grew volatile, my presence alone changed the tone. Species that would once snarl now hesitated. They watched me for cues, trying to understand the humans' strange talent for standing calmly between forces that should have crushed us. "You confuse them," Vale said once, almost amused. "We're good at that," I replied.